Hey, everybody. This is Josh for another episode of the CIPP Canadian Immigration Pros podcast. I am your host, Josh Schachnow, Canadian immigration lawyer and CEO over at Visto.ai. Thank you again for tuning in for another episode. I am very happy to be joined by Sahil from SKM Immigration. Sahil, thanks so much for coming on the show today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you for having me here. It's my pleasure to be here.
Awesome. We have some good items on our agenda today. It is late January, which means there's been a ruckus in the international student space. We're going to talk a little bit about that, especially how it affects maybe things like PGWPs, OWPs, pathway to PR. We're going to talk a little bit about the Ontario PNP program as well. Sahil's going to give us some updates on especially how the international graduate student stream has been updated. We'll probably talk a little bit as well about LMIAs and work permits, and especially how that program is kind of looking in the grand scheme of things right now that everything's kind of shifted, right, since the international
For sure.
student news. But before we jump in, Sahil, can you give us a quick introduction? Tell everybody a little bit more about yourself and what you're working on these days?
Sure. My name is Sahil Kaushal, and I am a registered Canadian immigration consultant, also a licensed paralegal in province of Ontario. I have been in immigration industry for over 6 years now. I myself immigrated to Canada as an international student, which sort of gives me experience of every stage of immigration that a person goes through in order to obtain permanent residence, ultimately citizenship. So, that's something that my clients really, love about when I'm able to relate, to them when what they are, sort of facing a challenge in their immigration journey. I have been lucky to be exposed to all sorts of areas of immigration, ranging from refugees to economic immigration to business immigration. My primary focus in my practice is all economic immigration and, helping businesses get labor from overseas and navigating through immigration challenges for their employees.
Awesome. Appreciate the introduction. And absolutely, I think that'll give a lot of context for what we're going to talk about. I don't think we can ignore international students on a week like this. We are
Definitely.
recording this January 24th. This episode might go live next week. But, anyways, worst case, we're about, if you're listening or watching in the future, about a few days away from the recent international cap, right? Or I should say, international student cap that has been imposed by IRCC. A whole bunch more changes too, right? In terms
For
of
sure.
what is and isn't eligible for a PGWP. Can you bring spouses and common law partners? In general, Sahil, what are your thoughts? Were you surprised by the news? Do you like the news? Do you not like the news? Where's your head at?
Well, I think Minister Miller has been sort of, giving out the guesses from past couple of months, I would say, that they are thinking of, introducing a cap. So it wasn't a surprise, honestly, but the way it was done sort of came out as a surprise to me because, it just happened all of a sudden and wasn't done in stages, wasn't done, I feel, with a plan because if we consider that, the attestation letter requirement for all of the student permit applicants that was implemented from the day of announcement, and there is no framework in place with provinces to give out the attestation letters. So basically, all the study permit applicants are at a standstill. So that is something that I sort of did not like, but I do like the idea where things are going. I feel, it was much needed. And again, it's something in the right direction.
Right. I think I generally agree, especially in the sense that it was a surprise. I'm less surprised that they did something. I'm more surprised at how extreme it was. And like you
Sure.
said, kind of all at once, right? I'm surprised he put a cap. I mean, he's been talking a tough game for the last few months, and good on him. He followed up with his words, right? He was kind of threatening, and hey, if you're
Mhm.
not going to get your stuff together, and
Right.
hey, this is an option that we might take. And then they took it, right? I was kind of surprised that they took it so quickly. But I do think it's a move in the right direction to clean up an industry that's just been far too unregulated for far too long, in
Definitely.
my opinion. So
Definitely.
where do you think things go from here, Sile? Obviously, it's going to take the provinces, probably a couple months to figure out their attestation letter stuff. I do think it's not a good move that you basically freeze all these study permit applications, right?
Right.
What's an aspiring international student supposed to do? I guess sit on their hands for a couple months, which maybe in the grand scheme of things isn't the end of the world. But where do you think things kind of go from here, and what do you think the outlook is for the international student space in Canada?
Well, firstly, briefly, I'll mention about, people who were in process, like, people who were in process of their study permit applications. They are in a state of panic. And I have been, you know, slammed with those inquiries and the concerns of my clients that what are we supposed to do? And the idea
Do you
that
mean students who've maybe they've got their LOA, but they haven't applied for the
exactly, or they
because
have,
presumably if you've submitted the visa application, I think you're in the clear,
yeah, no,
unless I'm
people who
wrong.
are, let's say they have got the LOA, as you said, who have paid the fee, but were waiting or in process of applying. So they
Right.
sort of were the ones who got affected very badly. And they
Right.
are in panic because their fee is paid. Maybe now they want to reconsider their decision of even not going ahead with the application, but they have to go through the refund stages, or a lot of that has to be figured out for them.
Deferral, whatever it is.
Exactly. So that is something which I really feel bad for. But coming on to people or international students who were already within Canada, I feel there hasn't been any big difference to their condition because, they're already there. So they can still, half of their spouses would already be in Canada or were in process of coming to Canada. They're still eligible for PGWPs. That is coming from September the 1st. So, they're still good with that condition. And, I really don't see much change for people who are currently, which I sort of do expect because, what has been happening over the period of time is, you see the number of international students, increasing. It has reached almost, 900,000 per year, more than that. What are we really doing to really settle those international students or foreign workers in and integrating them to Canadian workforce? Because, the idea behind immigration in Canada is that we do need immigrants because our population in next 10 years is going to retire a lot of working population. And we do need good workers and we do need the younger working age population to, run our economy. But what is really happening for the international students or foreign workers which are coming in order to integrate them? I was at a business symposium where there were people from immigration ministry as well as people from employers who are in need of a lot of foreign workers. A lot of employers were like, we need people yesterday. And
Hmm.
even the people who are coming in, so let's say Ontario, they until 2022 had a very low number of applicants to be nominated under PNP. So the ratios are not matching. If there are 500,000 students coming in, the quota for every province to nominate, or even for federal level immigration programs, is way less in comparison to people coming in. Now, a lot of people argue that, of course, not all international students are promised permanent residency, which I agree to, which is a valid point. That's a temporary resident pathway. Not everybody will be guaranteed a path to PR, but, you know, the idea of bringing them is still bringing in the talent which can integrate with our Canadian system. So that is something that I really don't like about the current system, that, a lot of international students and foreign workers are not able to find the right pathway, in the immigration plans, as well as the direction that came up in late 2022, I guess in November or December. where they sort of decided to come up with different programs for better integration. One major thing was a program designed for international students, a permanent resident pathway for international students. And that never came through. You know, there are multiple regional programs, one of such as a rural and northern immigration pilot, which is again set to expire in summer of, I think, July this year. But, maybe it turns out to be a permanent program like Atlantic Immigration Pilot, which started off as a pilot, but with success, it did turn into a permanent program. But now, if we talk about RNIP, the allowance or the quota there was sort of 1,700 candidates per year. So we have 9 or 10 communities participating in that program, but the quota is just 1,700. How are they supposed to really attract people to come in and apply for permanent residency through that program? Or even if there are people there who are applying or interested in obtaining PR through that program, they just get scared that, you know what, the numbers that they're going to take in are very small, and we are just scared. Like, this is the concern that I see day to day with my clients. They go like, okay, I'm willing to move up to Sudbury, let's say, or North Bay, which are the participating communities, but what are the chances of me actually going there and getting in, because they're only going to take certain amount of candidates, which is way less in comparison to people who are, willing or are in line to apply for that particular program. So that's something that is really, I feel, despite of the announcements that came in early this week, there should have been something on lines of these issues as well, that, okay, yes, we are stopping the future students or we are capping them, but what about, sort of 800,000, 900,000 students incoming every year from past, I would say, 4 to 5 years? What are we really thinking about them? So that is something that is really a challenge that I feel that needs to be addressed as well. It's not just the international student industry, but also likewise, if you talk about any program, now they're choosing either provincial nomination program or federal program. Like Express Entry also came up with occupation specific draws. They are focusing on tech, healthcare, trades. But now, what are the provisions or benefits given to foreign workers or international students to actually qualify for healthcare professions in Canada? A nurse, foreign qualified nurse, has to go through rigorous, paperwork and training for 1 to 2 years in order to get qualified to practice as a nurse in Canada. So why can't one international student who's studying, let's say, nursing sciences in Canada, or is a foreign qualified, go for, let's say, a challenge exam or more simplified process to, be licensed to practice in Canada and then just start the job? Because yes, they understood that we need so-and-so talent and we need to focus our immigration programs on bringing in those kind of people. But you have a lot of people within Canada who are willing to, let's say, become a nurse, become a licensed plumber, become a technician. But the problem is that the process of doing so is so slow, is very hard. Sometimes it's difficult for me to even navigate. Some clients come to me asking for help. They, can you help me with this process? I would go even for me to navigate sometime, there's not much information out there. There's no clear instructions. You have to call them. So all of that. And even for lawyers, I myself have seen that happening with a lot of my friends, a lot of my connections in the industry, that foreign trained lawyers, they also have to go through NCA exams, which are 6 to 7 exams, and then articleship, and then, of course, the barrister and solicitors. So that whole process is a good 2 to 3 year process. Why not, if that international student is coming in to study law here, let's say LLM, to make it simplified for them that they don't have to do NCAs, they can qualify, so they'll fill those highly talented jobs that are vacant in this economy and benefit from it. Otherwise, what is happening? That talent which is coming in, which is qualified, is just like, there's a joke that the doctors are driving Ubers or taxis. So that mismatch, I feel, really needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I think I totally agree. To kind of summarize, well, number one, it'll be interesting to see what else comes, right? If they're willing
Of
to
course.
do this in the international student space, I wonder what and how much more might be coming this year, even for PR, different pathways for students, like you were mentioning, maybe more changes for express entry. I don't think they have to make any more, but, anyways, we can get into that. But to kind of summarize, I think what the biggest point that I took from what you just said, which I agree with, is this is a good step on the student space for maybe like being more strategic with what students we're letting in. But now, what the heck do we do with the million that are here right now?
Exactly.
And how do we better align? I think the key is alignment, right? How do we
For sure.
align the temporary programs with PR? Should every temporary resident be guaranteed PR? No. But if we're going to bring in 500,000 students a year, why don't we focus them or push them towards programs and occupations that could actually set them up for success, meaning they can actually get a job that they want or that they
Right.
studied for. And number two, it's actually a need in our economy. Then everybody wins, right? We
Exactly.
fill our labor shortages, and the students don't wake up 4 years down the road 100K in debt and realize they won't get PR and have to go home, right?
Exactly.
So if we can get that better alignment between temporary and permanent residents, we could probably, hopefully, eventually go back to the glory days, right? I like to call them like the pre 2020s, right? Pre COVID, where Canadian immigration was great and the processing times weren't terrible, right? So
Definitely.
I guess we'll see. Do you think, with all that said, do you think we'll see some big changes, especially to PR this year, 2024?
Well, what I see is it's already undergoing changes. Occupation specific draws at federal level is a new change, which just took place, in the end of last year. And I'm yet to see the results. I do see that they sort of invited, you know, twice for every segment. Like, there were two draws for healthcare occupations and two draws at least for all other occupations that they're focusing. But
But like 2 draws each in 6
in
months, right? Like,
exactly.
I I thought the industry-specific draws were a great idea, then they barely even used them. I don't know about you, I'm kinda surprised, and meanwhile, in January, we've only seen all program draws, so they haven't even used them yet.
Exactly. The problem here is what I feel that was a good step in right direction. But what preference are they really giving to people who are within Canada? Like, during COVID, we had individual draws, CEC draws, FSW draws, where the cutoffs were different and people who had Canadian work experience, people who were within Canada, got preference because they were invited separately. But right now, they are all pooled into one, category. There's no separate draws for people who are within Canada. So I feel, again, permanent residency should be preferred, or the preference should be given to somebody who's within Canada, who's already working, who's already, let's say we need a technician. We have that technician already working in Canada under CAC, but because of higher cutoff, he's not being invited. What's the benefit? And maybe
But do you think, Sahil, that the bonus points you get from a Canadian immigrant, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you, but don't you think that the people inside Canada who have the bonus points from a Canadian degree and the bonus points from 1 or 2 years of Canadian work experience, that's kind of like a quasi filter in a sense?
that is true. That is true. It, in a way, does act like that. But I do feel that, if we are better, again, like we mentioned in the past, that if we are better able to align them, of course, not preferring or giving preference to every foreign worker within Canada, but to the people that we need. Like, again, a lot of employers and businesses in Canada need a lot of talent, which they are not able to source within Canada. So that is something that we should be aligning to, that, the talents that are needed and that the people that are already here and working in Canada should be selected. Not everybody, because, the state of international student program really produced a lot of graduates which were holding the diplomas or degrees which were good for nothing, like business general, business management, which, basically gives you no particular skill set to land a good job. So, I mean, that eventually the new policies will change now, but I feel, leaving them aside, but people who actually studied the programs or the skill set that is needed should be better aligned.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think there will be a weird, it'll suck for a lot of people in the short term. Like you said, the people who have their LOAs but haven't submitted their study permits yet, or a good chunk of the million international students that have graduated and are going to have a very hard time getting permanent residence in the next 1 to 2 years.
Definitely.
Until that kind of flushes out, not to make that sound too negative, but until that period kind of washes out, I think it'll be tough for people inside Canada right now. Let's try and take the more positive spin and talk about a couple of these options and pathways. I know you mentioned the Ontario PNP program, specifically the International Student Stream, which is, I think, a good segue from what we just chatted about. Can you tell people, number one, what is this stream, right, for some people who may
For
not know
sure.
what it is? And number two, how it's changed recently and maybe how it could be a good option for some students.
So talking about Ontario Immigration Nominee Program, especially International Student Stream, it is designed for people who graduate from a certificate program or a degree program within Canada. Earlier, it was just for people who graduate from Ontario DLIs and they have a job offer within the province of Ontario and they can apply for permanent residency. They do not need to have 1 year or 2 years of work experience, unlike other streams of Ontario PNP. And, all they need is graduate from the program within Ontario, a 2-year program, and then land a job offer and be eligible for, Ontario PNP. Earlier, sort of, I would say, year and a half ago, this program used to be like, first, they would just open up the application portal and first come, first serve basis, which was really bad because, somebody who really deserves to get in would not get a chance because, of course, the portal issues, the technical issues that would occur because, everybody's trying to log in at the same time. But now they moved it to, they changed the selection criteria through expression of interest system, which is similar to express entry that, you would get points for criterias and you will be invited and there are cutoffs regular every month or month and a half and they send out the invitations. So the change that came recently was earlier, only the education requirement was only 2 years. And now they have reduced it down to even 1 year graduate program. So anybody who, graduates from a 1-year program can also be eligible for this stream, as well as
from anywhere in Canada.
In Canada.
1 year program from anywhere in Canada.
In Canada.
Okay.
And they graduate from that and they're able to, apply for permanent residency under the stream, as well as they included institutions from outside Ontario. So basically, even if you are a graduate from a program or an institution in Alberta, you can still apply for this as long as you have a job offer from Ontario employer, right? Which is a very good thing because, Ontario has always been what I feel after the talent that they need. Like, I do like Ontario's PNP program because they really target the talent that they need in the province and they're always making changes in the direction of, better aligning that talent, which I really like about that. But the only challenge there is that until 2022, the agreement between province and the federal government for the number of nomination certificates Ontario could issue was very less. Now it has gone up to sort of 16 to 17,000 applicants per year, which is a big number as compared to, past years, which was as low as 4 to 5,000 applicants. So considering it's one of the biggest and busiest province of Canada, right? We shouldn't, forego that. So this program, the changes that came up this year, again, it does help a lot of 1 year certificate program graduates who are within Canada to get a job offer in Ontario and apply for PR. And something to add there, it is also occupation specific. So there are invitations
Right.
sent out in two categories. One is a general draw, where, of course, anybody could be invited. And there are occupation specific draws where they would target tech occupations, they would target skill trades, and they would target, healthcare occupations as needed in the province. So, any graduate landing a good, field job, which is in demand in Ontario, they have a very high chance of getting invited through their stream. The only setback that I saw was in our industry, a lot of immigration consultants, as well as lawyers, they went out being like, oh yeah, that's a big change. You are now eligible, catch bait marketing. But the thing is, we still need to understand that, yes, you qualify based on these simple eligibility criteria, but there are still, again, the draws, the general draw only happens once or twice. Last year, it only took place once. All other draws were occupation specific. So, if you are being told that, yes, you're eligible, but you're not on the occupations in demand list, you may not get the invitation. But, that was being marketed out and I got a lot of, people coming to me for consultation asking, I should be eligible for this because I did 1 year program and I did it from the institution that is eligible. Why can't I apply? I go yes, you can apply. You are eligible, but you do not fall under in-demand streams and the draws may not happen. So that's something that I really wanted to, give it out there that it's a good update. Definitely, it's a good program, but we still need to, basically make a choice if what are the chances of us getting invited in there and, how beneficial it is for us.
Right. I mean, definitely a good point, especially for those considering express entry as well, right? It's one thing to be eligible for a program. It's an entirely different thing to have a good chance at getting an invitation and
Exactly.
succeeding in that program. So as Sahil said, do your homework or talk to reputable immigration professionals, which are usually ones that I like to have on this show. It is late January 2024. If you're listening or watching this in the future, you might want to double check because sometimes PNPs open and close, right? So just double check the Ontario PNP website. But it does sound like it could be a good opportunity for some in the year ahead. So that's great. Sahil, the last thing I wanted to chat about, kind of along the same lines, I like that with PR, they're kind of giving the provinces some say, right? It's kind of ironic if you think about it, because in the international student space, they're saying, hey, listen, we trusted the schools in the provinces for too long and they've done nothing. So screw it. We're going to have to step in here.
Right.
But I like on the employment side, which is so different, in my opinion, I like when they empower the provinces and empower the employers to make decisions and help kind of affect immigration really based on the market needs, right?
That's
What does my province need right now? What does my company need to hire right now? I'd like to ask you about one of the shortfalls there, which is sure we have some of these systems in place, we have the LMIAs and the work permits in place, but sometimes they could be so slow and inefficient that some companies don't even use them, which I think is a shame. I think the LMIA might be the most underutilized, unfortunately, program because it's just long and slow. What are your thoughts on that, and what would you like to see in terms of changes there to maybe help improve the ecosystem?
No, a very good point there that, it's one of the most underutilized industry for good, I would say. It's still being misused, but for the good use, it's not being put to the good use, primarily because a lot of businesses or employers in Canada, firstly, they lack knowledge about the program. They do not understand the program, and they feel it just entails a lot of scrutiny, a lot of paperwork, and headache. I from for
Rightfully so, right? I mean, if you try to read through those instructions, right? I mean, it's not exactly the simplest thing. So I think what we're both kind of saying is it's underutilized, but not surprisingly, because I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's gotten complicated, right? And the processing times kind of suck too, right?
Oh yeah, I was going to come on to that. Yesterday itself, I was
Hmm.
checking, for high wage and low wage streams, it is beyond 55 business days. So
Oh my
now,
God.
if I am a business and I want a foreign worker from, let's say, from Dubai, first, I have to find the right professional to do that process for me. And then just the application process alone takes 55 business days. Well, that's the average processing. It could be higher or it could be lower. Definitely higher, I would say. And then,
And after preparing the app, right, you don't just snap your fingers and have an LMIA ready to
exactly,
go, right? We're probably talking anywhere from like 1 to 4 weeks if you're an employer who's never applied for one before to
definitely
work
just,
with your immigration professional just to prepare it, right?
yeah, I mean, the program requirement states for most of the application, 4 week of advertisement and recruitment time.
Right.
So
I
just
forgot about that
before
too.
we apply. So, that plays its part. And then again, the processing time of LMI. And adding on to it is the processing time with immigration for the work permit of that particular candidate, because not every applicant is from visa exempt country, or, they do need to apply outside while being outside Canada. And average wait times range from 3 to 4 months. So for a business owner to get the talent from outside Canada, it is no less than a 6 to 8 month process. And funny enough, I
Hmm.
mentioned earlier as well, I talked to a lot of business owners. They tell to me, I wanted this employee yesterday because we are struggling, because we don't have people who can fill in within Canada. So when I talk to them, I explain them the process, they would go like, well, 6 to 8 months, I'm not going to do this, because it just does
Hmm.
not make sense that I don't even know if I'll have this project, 6 to 8 months from now, if it's that type of industry. And some businesses go like, I may not even be able to sustain by then, right?
Right.
And funny enough, that long processing time, I experienced the same thing in few of my applications which are ongoing. So recently in November, they increased the median wages. So now the applications which are already in process, again, they're subject to those changes. Employers
Hmm.
also get affected because, this time, surprisingly, median wages for some occupations went up by $5 to $10 hourly. So they had to
Hmm.
really reconsider that if they even want to continue with this process, because the median wage, which is the requirement of this program for an employer to pay to the foreign worker, it's just something that they can't afford because, it has gone too high. So that is another challenge which comes into the play. And again, so these are some challenges that I feel are from the immigration or the department side. I feel they did come up with a preferred or trusted, you know, pathway where if you have applied for LMI in past, you may not have to show as many documentation again. You may not have to submit proof of, business or from CRA documents, but it's not enough. It's not enough. There are certain
Hmm.
exemptions onto advertising, especially in like agricultural sector. But again, they're not enough because yes, I'm saving a month of advertisement time, but it's still not helping me in bringing that candidate any faster than it should be.
Right.
Coming down,
It's almost irrelevant in the sense that, like, oh, if you bring it down from 7 to 6 months, does it really matter? Right? Obviously, it's a good thing, But if, like you said, if you're a business owner, you need somebody yesterday, are you even going to start the process if
Exactly.
it's going to be probably a minimum of 5 to 6 months until you get the approval? Not to mention, then the workers got to lift up their life, move to Canada,
Yep.
get settled, get trained, right? So it's impractical, right? I mean, I've been saying for a while now that I actually think IRCC has built up quite a good core immigration system,
Right.
right? I think LMIA work permit's great. I think express entry's pretty damn good. It's
Right.
if they just went back to the basics and like made the LMI and the work permit quicker and more efficient for companies. Maybe we put some guardrails in place on the international student program so
Right.
that we're only taking students that we can set up for success and that will fill roles that are needed in our economy.
Definitely.
And, we refocus PR and get the processing times back down. That'd be a hell of a start, in my opinion.
Oh, totally agreed. That's another challenge that, the backlog for immigration is
Hmm.
never ending. And, I'll share a funny story, but I do feel if even if they're recruiting people, like lately in 2023, I have seen constant openings that, IRCC is hiring at
Hmm.
multiple levels, multiple positions. Funny enough, like, I don't know if the people that they're hiring are working the way they should be. I mean, that's a total political topic as well, but I'll share a story where I submitted the application for under express entry stream for one of my clients. And due to delay in the application, it was like almost 8 months and there was no up. I requested the GCMS notes where I see that the the assessment or the junior officer who's reporting or doing the eligibility check reported that the candidate does not meet the cutoff requirement for that draw. The CRS score, according to him, he did his own calculation, falls below the cutoff of that particular round of invitation. Therefore, he's ineligible. So the file was on hold, and there would be the decision making officer who would review the file and make the decision. That sort of set me off. I was like, okay, maybe I made some mistakes. You never know. Like, we are all humans. I said with my client, we go through multiple times everything. We calculate the CRS score, we calculate, we check all the documents, and there was no discrepancy. And I was surprised why this was happening. I'm just thinking about what to do at this point because I never faced such problem or issue. And, I decided that, maybe I'll write some explanation and, send a web form in. And then I see that in 5 days from me receiving those GCMS notes, the client gets the portal request that your application has been approved. So
Hmm.
that again tells me that, that application was on hold because the eligibility check that one officer is performing was not up to the mark, which was clearly wrong. And of course, the decision making officer saw that and approved the application, but it did create that delay. It did create. So, I do,
But all you did was request GCMS
that's
notes?
it.
Wow. So I guess maybe that triggers something on their back end? I don't know. But to your point, like, I think part of them overcomplicating has shot them in the foot. Because what happens now, right? They got to hire hundreds, maybe thousands of staff.
Right.
They got to train them, right? I'm assuming that takes at least a few weeks.
For sure.
But what happens when you double the amount of programs?
Yeah.
Now you got to train these staff on twice the amount of eligibility requirements, document requirements, approval codes, GCMS review stuff, right? So I would only imagine it's just become harder to be a processing agent at IRCC, and you and many other immigration professionals have shared stories with me about poor processing,
Oh, yeah.
right? Which really sucks. It slows down processing even further for those waiting for decisions.
Definitely.
And yours is another example of it really sucks for the professionals because now you got to figure out or think about how to maybe try to fix a problem that shouldn't even have existed in the first place,
And,
right?
clients panic. They go
For
like,
sure.
what's wrong. And at times they would blame us, that, probably you did something wrong. So a lot. So the point here was that again, having multiple portals, having all these
Mhm.
backlogs has not helped. Even the people who are within IRCC processing, they haven't been taking, it hasn't been easy for them either. I totally understand. But there has to be something on that end in order to improve that timeline. So that, the employers out there or the businesses who need that support are able to get that. They came up with, the global talent stream where the LMIA gets expedited and approvals can happen within 2 weeks. And even the work permits are expedited there. My personal experience, not talking about, other professionals, a lot of people in tech industry, all the occupations which were given preference under that stream, have resorted to not hiring foreign workers. Either they're doing intra-company transferees because a lot of tech companies which provide talent to Canadian companies have presence globally and they're able to bring in through the ICT stream, which is way simpler and easier as compared to LMIA process or even the global talent stream. That's one thing. And second thing from my experience when, I have had chats with a lot of business owners from tech industry, they are resorting to, you know, outsourcing this work to people outside of Canada because they feel that even yes, the processing time has been slowed down. I mean, cut short, it's faster. Yes, you can get a candidate within a month, but the requirements, the payroll obligations, the other employer obligations still are a lot and they are scared off. So one big thing that they're scared of is the the inspection that you are subject to from ESBC because, not to say that they're doing something wrong, but nobody wants to take that extra amount of paperwork or headache if they can just resort to outsourcing. So again, like it was done for the occupations, which sort of did not benefit a lot to the industry because they had an option of outsourcing. But what about in farming industry? Like that is really in a bad shape because not a lot of people within Canada are willing to work in the farms and or they just do not have the talent or the skills to do that work. They have to wait a lot. So that challenge
Yeah.
stays. But what I feel is that's where I would really, like to add this out there that I like to help in a way that we can always look for the programs which are the shortest or target people from the countries which may not require visa to enter. They have a visa-free visa exemption and they can always apply for work permit at port of entry. So, we can explore all of these avenues as well as what I have done in my practice with my clients is planning for the future. Taking an example of farm, they know that during the spring, they need extra labor, they need extra workers. Why don't we plan, 6 months before that? Yes, in spring of 2024, we are going to need so many people. Let's do the process for them. So instead of them thinking that the businesses thinking that this is something which is very difficult, I would say it's really not. And professionals like us are there to help them navigate these challenges and make the process, smooth for them, which I would really like. I think, you know, we need that awareness. And somewhere on my LinkedIn network, I was reading that UBC has started sort of one campaign in British Columbia that they are basically educating business owners there about these processes, which I really
Mhm.
love. And it was led by an RCIC there. So I really love that. I think we need to educate the business owners more because at the end of the day, it's not really about it's it goes hand in hand. If the businesses are good, the immigrants which are coming in, they're gonna get jobs. If businesses are out of business for whatsoever reasons, not going to be good for any other immigrants either, which are coming into our economy and eventually who have high hopes
Sure.
from Canadian system or that Canada dream that they have.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that's a great note to end on, which is number one, probably more education, unless the government can simplify, in which case we wouldn't need as much education. But for the time being, some more education, work with a reputable professional to plan out if you think it's worth it, which hopefully, for enough people, it might be. Sahil, thanks so much for coming on the show. This has been very interesting and wide ranging. We were able to cover kind of a lot in a short period of time, from students to workers to PR and pathways and stuff like that. If anybody is interested in learning more about you or your firm or getting in touch, where do you recommend that they go?
I would say LinkedIn is the best platform to reach me. And of course, my website, we can have it in the caption so that they can reach out to me.
Sounds good. For his LinkedIn and website, make sure to check the description below, whether you're watching on YouTube or maybe listening on your podcast platform of choice. Sahil, thanks again for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you for having me.